Hi there, and welcome to another episode of The InEVitable. This is MotorTrend show where we talk about the future of the car, be it an electric future, a self-driving future. On this particular episode, Ed Lowe and myself are going to discuss the future of hot rodding.
Yes, with a very special guest. We have the editor-in-chief of Hot Rod Magazine, John McGann, in here to talk about the future of hot rodding. Also, in Hot Rod's 75th year. This is the diamond anniversary of the Hot Rod brand. This is the magazine that gave birth to MotorTrend. It's MotorTrend's bigger brother.
It all.
The brand that started it all back in 1948. So we thought, what better way to celebrate this big anniversary by talking to the big dog, John McGann, about the future of hot rodding and whether it includes what it includes.
The stuff we talk about every week.
Yeah.
You know, maybe not autonomy, but electrification. What do they think about these, 9-second Teslas taking over drag strips? And is there a future?
Yeah. So let's find out with John McGann.
All right. We're here with the editor-in-chief of Hot Rod Magazine.
John
who
McGann.
Just drove his first EV.
Yes.
So
You're welcome. You are welcome. Let's let him tell it. So
yeah.
as before.
I like how Ed wants you to tell it by talking.
Well, no. Let me just set it up.
Oh, okay.
Prior to yesterday,
Doing great, John.
the only EV you had ever driven was
It was a 2006 or 7 Mustang built by AEM that had converted Tesla drivetrain in it, and they built it to. It was R&D vehicle for their own. I was just about to say engine management system,
motor management system.
Motor management system that they were developing.
Okay. This is like a press car. I think one of our guys, one of the MotorTrend guys, drove it as well. And did you take it around the block or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're in Hawthorne, close to where I live, so we just kind of did a loop around their office in Hawthorne, and yeah, that was the only yes.
But I think you mentioned you might have gotten a ride in a Tesla before too.
In the Tesla loop at the SEMA show. Which is the underground thing that they take you from the parking garage to the
peak Tesla.
Yes.
That would have been a Model 3, I think, or
probably.
They had all kinds. They had 3s, X's, Ys,
the SUV version.
But that to me, I love that because this is the full self-driving company who it's literally a one-lane, one-way tunnel, and they have a driver. Like, come on.
It's probably liability. But fair to say, prior to yesterday, less than 24 hours ago, you had been a production EV virgin. Never had driven a production electric vehicle until we threw the keys to MotorTrend's 2023 Truck of the Year, the Ford F-150 Lightning, which you drove from the office to your home last night. It was probably less than 3 miles. 2 miles, something like that.
5.3.
5.3 miles. And then up here, which is about 15?
Yeah, it was 16 something.
Okay, I don't know if you did donuts last night and
no,
sideshow.
I didn't. No, I didn't. I did drive around a little bit last night, but yeah.
All right, so
and
what'd you think? What'd you? Oh, wait, hang on. Before this is additional.
You're doing great, John. This is really enlightening.
Additional setup. Your daily driver though is a truck.
It is, yes.
It's a
67 Chevy C10 pickup truck. I also have a 93 GMC single cab C1500 two-wheel drive pickup truck.
So
those are my
trucks.
So you're a truck guy.
Yeah, kind of by default.
And you modified both. I mean, your C10 is lowered. It's beautiful. Okay.
Yeah, it's got a 6-speed manual transmission, coilovers. Both of them have coilovers. I've had 3 or 4 different engines in the C10 already. So
okay.
So I've done a lot of work to that thing. I said trucks by default because they're more affordable than a car from the 60s is these days. So that's kind of how you end up with a pickup truck.
Got it.
What did I think?
Yes.
It's actually kind of interesting. I was not expecting the accelerator to function as a brake pedal too. So when I started to pull out of the parking lot or the parking spot, and you lift off the gas, and things like, I almost went through the windshield.
Right.
I wasn't expecting that.
Okay.
So that initially was really interesting.
Didn't like it. You didn't like it probably, or just
overall, didn't like it. And it's hard to say because I've had this reaction to most new cars lately is they just seem to be and it's more what I'm used to. I like the sort of rough around the edges and something that you have a little bit more interaction with than as a driver. And
Wait! I just poisoned the well. Sorry, I meant you didn't like that sensation.
Oh,
but
pardon me.
Yeah,
Yes.
So, yes. Okay.
was,
let's just go back. But I think you're going this. You're giving me the overall.
yeah.
view.
I didn't like it at first, but then it was kind of interesting the way it worked. And so I'm thinking, well, someone had to program all that stuff into the logic of the ECM, and how does it do that? And then I'm like, okay, well, I've heard before that
MCM, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I've heard that brake maintenance, brake component maintenance on electric cars is almost nil because they don't wear out brake pads and rotors. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand why. And then I'm halfway home. I'm like, well, does it turn the brake lights on in the back of the car when I'm lifting off the accelerator? It has to.
It does.
So
yeah,
then,
yeah.
and when it got dark, I could see back there, and it's like, okay, the brake lights are coming on when I'm lifting off the accelerator. I just thought that was really interesting.
So just to pause, so you know why though it's doing that, right? So it's regen.
Yes.
And then and this is something Tesla pioneered when they launched. Like, there's this concept of one pedal driving. So if you think about cars when you're commuting, the ability to not have to go back and forth and also capture energy at the same time. So manufacturers are tuning in varying levels, and that's something maybe to play with on the drive home. You can turn off. I think F-150 you can.
I can't remember. There's probably low regen and high regen.
Because a lot of people don't like it. We
sure.
actually, when we had Spike on, right, his wife, they got a Model Y for his wife, and she was like, I hate this. And then after a while,
Yeah,
you're like, you
but-
get used to it. And you're like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah, my wife, after day one of the Rivian, she's like, I can't stand it. And then now she's like, oh, it's the greatest. You never have to touch the brake pedal.
Yeah. So, and this is something, actually, Angus, I think he drove the Bolt home from Car of the Year one year, and he's like, it's the 14, it's a high desert in California, coming all the way into LA, and he's just like, I didn't touch the brakes once on the drive home, which is like,
And then
crazy.
and then the real reason though is the regen, because an EV is 60% of the electricity in the battery it goes to forward propulsion, which is good, because with gasoline it's 20% of the energy in the gasoline is propulsion, the rest is heat and noise. But because of the regen, so the motor spin backwards when you come off the throttle, it recaptures 20 to 30% of the energy. So that an EV can be 80 to 90% efficient, whereas a gas car is only 20% efficient. So that's why it does that.
Yeah, because I was watching the power distribution. I set that up in the dash, and I was watching that as I was driving home and then on the freeway. And you can see where accelerating onto a freeway will take a chunk of the available range mileage. More so, like, just stop and go traffic driving home almost didn't change the range.
They do better. EVs do better in traffic.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Wide open on the highway.
The worst thing for an EV is 80 miles an hour with cruise control set.
I could see that.
Especially a Ford.
The worst thing for that
F-150.
F-150 is to go above 65 miles an hour
Yeah.
for an extended period of time,
Yeah.
because the range just starts to go down really
Yeah.
quickly. So,
And that's Aire.
speaking of, did you get on it? Did you like?
I did.
and you're
Yeah, it is interesting. It's quick. You said you warned me yesterday, and it is. It's quick. It's definitely more quicker than anything I own. I used to have a big block Chevy in the C10 with a 540 big block, 540 cubic inches, and maybe that would have been able to keep up. But me shifting, that probably would have walked on me.
Yeah.
So,
the best. And I hate to. No, I'll tell it. I came back we did Truck of the Year last year, where we picked this thing the winner. We did it in Arizona, and we're driving back. And I chose to drive back the F-150 Lightning, the Pro, which is the stripper work truck.
Okay.
Not a single cab, but it's a short bed,
Yeah.
gray plastic, no unibrow, no tail on the front.
yeah.
And I blitzed most people. We ended on Friday, and most guys stay until Saturday morning. Leave. I got to get home, so I hopped in the freeway, and I'm ripping through L.A. and maybe on the 60. And there's a guy. It's always a Dodge Charger.
They are, yeah.
And
It's those guys.
and he's just like weaving in and out of traffic, and I was just like, oh.
Did it have the credit score right on the fender? 392?
I punched it, and I just rode this dude's bumper And I started like, I might have given him the high beams, like, hey, get out of my way. And I could see him just like, what is going on? And he pulled off and he let me by and he's like, that's not lightning. And then I just floored it again and he was a distant speck. Like this is one of the greatest joys of this truck because it's like a sleeper. Like nobody expects it, especially when you get like the work truck version. But so how you feeling? You're gonna give it back later today, and you're like, it's kind of interesting. Or did you? I told you to check out the frunk. I thought the frunk it's kind of it's a mind blowing kind of situation.
Yeah, it is. It's it is interesting. I've got to say I don't know if I'm going to be a converted person, but I do because I do like engines and gasoline engines, I suppose. So it's interesting to see how it changes driving, how it changes interaction on the road between gasoline cars or older cars and newer cars, just in the way you slow down and turn into a driveway. I mean, this is why I did that to drive into Starbucks this morning, and it's like braking, and then turning, where you normally like let off the brake and coast into the driveway and then up. So it was like almost came to a stop, and then that's kind of off topic, but
hey, it's part of the driving experience. What you will learn is instead of coming all the way off the gas, you just come a little bit off the gas.
Exactly.
But you still have 10% of the pedal down.
Yeah.
And that'll give you what you want.
Yeah. And we were starting to talk, Johnny, before we started about I'm kind of interested in maintenance and what these things are like to maintain, how they hold up over time.
Yes.
I can rebuild anything on both of my trucks.
Right.
And that I'd be afraid to touch though.
With probably good reason. And honestly, this is interesting because
it's a huge point. Yeah.
You picked up the truck literally. So this is our owned F-150.
Yeah,
this is the one that MotorTrend. So MotorTrend bought. We bought a few vehicles this year, which is a break from our normal operating procedure where we borrow vehicles from manufacturers for a longer period of time. We got some budget. We bought this truck. We also bought a Maverick because they were in limited supply and they weren't really in the fleet. So we bought this one.
We're helping Ford out.
We bought it early. We're using it for comparison testing and range testing, which doesn't necessarily help Ford out all the time. We've savaged them on a couple of stories, especially on the bidirectional charging and how much that costs. $18,000 was the quoted price for us to set that up at one of our guys' homes. So hilarious. Anyways, we got a note about 2 weeks ago from Ford PR that our truck.
Please stop talking about us. Oh, sorry.
No.
Different note.
that our truck was one of the early builds. It was about 350 cars, and there's some recall related to the battery, and we needed to get it serviced really quickly. And this literally happened last week. They're like, "Can you take it into your local dealership, which is South Bay Ford, which is right across the freeway, from across the 405 from our office?" So you picked up the car. Actually, it had come back that day. Miguel brought it back, and then I was looking around I gotta get John an EV. Is the Lucid available? It's like, oh, the F-150 is there. So to your point, that's not something. I mean, recalls happen to internal combustion engines,
Sure.
all day long. But we asked whether Ford would let us take pictures of the truck at the dealership. They said no, it's a liability. Also, it's unique IP.
Why did you ask? Just go take pictures.
The dealer also said no. They said we had to check with corporate. So I went to corporate and said, hey, what do you think? They're like, no. No liability reasons from the service bay. Two, there's proprietary battery stuff here, which I was like, whatever. But then three,
because nobody could take it apart. There's a force field that.
Three, John lightly touched on the right to repair stuff that's happening. There's a lot of stuff going on in the EV space about how you can't touch your cars. You can't touch you call it ECM or the motor control module. You can't touch anything related to the code, and they generally don't want you cracking into either the battery case, the battery cells themselves, or the motor. Yeah. So I can get why, from your perspective, this is not that interesting because you put 3 different engines in one of your trucks, right? I think to the general consumer, they're like, overall, our understanding is, and it's yet to be borne out, but Tesla has a pretty strong case. The consumables are really low. There's no motor oil, right? Yeah. You're changing tires, maybe, and windshield wipers, and most people probably don't change both if they're going to if they lease or own a car for 3 to 5 years. So you might not ever change any of those things.
That's true.
Most people would never change tires, or they go to Costco and get the cheapest, worst tires they can get that are in the right size.
And one thing, because you guys were talking, I dashed in here. I didn't get a chance to give you the.
I was complaining about my Rivian having to go back to the service center again
for air conditioning. But I was going to tell you, John, you should feel free to speak your mind here. And if like you're the editor-in-chief of Hot Rod and we work together, but if you want to slag on EVs, like the audience, especially the guys on YouTube, they're here for that.
Yeah.
So just go nuts. So
Right.
you know, like there's no problem at all. Like we're not gonna take you out the back behind the woodshed or anything. So just go nuts. Like
And you know, Rivian specifically.
Yeah.
So I'm very annoyed at the moment.
okay.
Okay, well, then I will unleash. You know, I guess I touched on it before. I have always kind of found newer cars to be just generally soulless. So the argument I would levy against this is the same. It's more of the same. Now, what does that mean? You know, I think
what does that mean?
Right. I think the trend is heavier cars. For more safety equipment, I get it. I'll preface this by saying I'm not a great like track driver or anything, but all the assistance that's
The nannies.
that
traction
drives me
control.
bananas. Like I was in a rental car. I did a lot of traveling last year, so I was in a lot of rental cars, and you know, the lane things, or the steering wheel starts doing that, and like one of them, the seat was like jabbing me in the back, and I was like,
Oh yeah.
like, what's going on here? All the chimes and warnings, and now if there's a way to turn all that off, which there probably is in most cars.
Not chimes and warnings. Sadly.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's
I found a lead investor and potential spokesperson for my $1 billion idea of dumb car. So I have a new. My whole idea is there should be a new category of vehicles that are sold that goes counter to smart cars.
that would
right?
be cool.
You buy it once, no subscriptions, as few nannies as possible. Doesn't remember anything about you.
I like that.
Okay, so none of that stuff. So dumb car. Okay, John's on board.
I'll be your spokesman.
Okay, there we go.
I do like the power delivery. Can't deny that. Same thing with that Mustang I drove, the AEM's Mustang. What I didn't like about that car, and I realize this is R&D thing, but it had the motor in the front, obviously no transmission, but it went into the rear axle. And so there's a lot of drivetrain lash. And it's like, you know, on and off. Or at least it was,
because they use an electric motor to power a transmission.
Right. And I was like, well, that's the difference. I'm not feeling that in this pickup truck.
Yeah, one
'Cause
speed.
It's a direct drive unit, I'm guessing.
Yep.
Goes right to the CV joints and out to the wheels. So you don't get that added layer of the rear axle differential thing in between the ground. And so that was a lot of like on and off driveline lash, which I thought was, you know, you get used to it. But then there was a lot of that noise from the axle, which you would, I think, normally hear in a car, but it's drowned out by the other sounds.
Right.
So I don't mind like mechanical noise, but that was a little bit like unrefined as I'm sitting here blasting new cars for being too refined.
Yeah. Hey.
But, you know.
Admit it. You're also a Chevy guy. This whole Ford thing. It's terrible.
I actually did use to own a Ford. I don't know if you remember, but when I was first started with CarCraft, I bought a Crown Victoria.
Oh, okay.
2003 that I had for a couple of years, about 3 years, and I did a bunch of work to that in CarCraft magazine. So, but yeah, generally a Chevy guy. I guess just
How about as a shop truck? How about as a get going to work thing? Are you interested? Is this anything? I'm not fishing here. I'm just curious. Like, you know, this is. Well, I'll ask you the question at the end about the whole inevitability of John McGann owning an EV at some point in his career. Probably not at this point, from what I gather. But I'm just curious. Is there any? Were you surprised at anything? Any insight or emotion, or are you any like? Oh, I guess I kind of get some of the appeal or anything like that. Or no?
I get it. Yes.
Okay.
I get it because it's smooth in traffic. You know, you mentioned my C10 being a manual transmission, and that's one thing. You know, what's it like driving with a clutch in a 405 and rush hour? Like that's never bothered me. Everything I've always had has had a manual transmission.
I'm with you on that. I never got the argument that, I'm in traffic in a manual.
Yeah,
It's like, and?
right.
You still got to touch the brake and the gas, you know? Like, what's the one
My
more
problem
pedal?
is I'm in traffic in a manual trying to do like 18 other things. I'm trying to do a call. Trying to
Yeah.
do
It just makes it. But you remember back when you were changing CDs, smoking, and
Right.
it was easy.
I did all that.
Okay, here's my question, and I ask this to a lot of people. Okay, So I'm going to stereotype grossly here, but
That's
like
okay.
hot rod guys hate new cars anyways.
They do.
Why do you care if a RAV4 is electric?
You shouldn't, I think.
Okay, that's my big thing, because I remember this guy, and he was wearing a Shelby jacket, and he was like, he was convinced that the government was going to take his car away in 2035. He would have been in the ground for 11 years at that point, based on his age. But and I was like, no, but I'm like, dude, Mustangs, like you like Mustangs? I'm like, on a good month, Ford sells 10,000 Mustangs a month. That's 120,000 a year. That's the only car you care about that's new. You hate every other new car. There's 15 million new cars sold.
Right.
I don't think the Mustang's going to be electric for a while. What do you care if the RAV4?
It already is.
Well, okay, yeah, the Mach-E, yeah. But I'm like, what do you care? And he had no answer. He was like, I just don't like it.
Yeah.
And I go, but what's the So I guess that's what I struggle with. It's like, you already hate new cars anyway.
Right, so
why do you hate these more? Like, what's the difference?
I know what you mean, and it is kind of a irrelevant argument in my perspective, because I think I can't expect everyone to enjoy driving the things I like to drive, or be attracted to the experience that I seek when I'm driving something. So,
right.
And it makes perfect sense. I've made the argument. For a few years now, I think cars are kind of turning into cell phones, where it's just something that you have. It does all this stuff for you.
Yep.
You trade it in, or you upgrade it every 3 years, or whatever the period of time ends up going to be. And
or it's upgrades over the air, like cell phones already do.
Yes.
So, this is the whole argument, or the whole thing that's happening with software-defined vehicles. Like, you are 100% correct. And I also get the argument, which I think you're going to, which is like, and now this thing that, you got to argue America had the most influence on the automobile after it was invented in Germany or whatever. Like, we mass produce it and create all the culture around it. It's becoming like a soulless. Like appliance, right? It's becoming like your refrigerator, like your dishwasher, and here's your car. Here's a pod that, it probably will be in the intro to this episode. Cars without steering wheels. That's ultimately the future, right? Where you get in the car, hey, take me to San Francisco, turn around, talk to your friends, or lay back and you sleep, and the thing does itself, right? Which is this dark, dismal future for Mr. McGann.
It is, yeah. I was thinking about that on the way here, because I was stuck in traffic on 405, and it's like, well, at some point, this thing would be able to just sort of coast along in traffic.
Actually, it is.
Try it on the way back.
The truck you drove, totally does that.
You have
BlueCruise,
which is their version of. So GM has
Super Cruise.
Tesla has full self-driving beta. This is not full self-driving beta. It's
Tesla's autopilot.
Yeah. Right. So BlueCruise is everything you already are annoyed by that you mentioned. It's adaptive cruise control with a little extra.
Okay.
So it will obviously do. Monitor the car in front of you, monitor the lanes, try keeping the center of the lane, and it's actually also watching you. If you see the BlueCruise, there's a little logo on the top corner, I think, of the part of the screen.
Yeah,
there's a little camera that's looking back to make sure that you are
doing this.
Okay. Yeah, and you're not. And if you look out the window for an extended period of time, it'll ping you and say, "Hey, look back at the road, dummy."
That's funny.
But yeah, it will. It actually had a major update. I haven't tried it since the update. It's supposed to be a lot better.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a lot better.
And GM Super Cruise is arguably the best out there right now.
Last year I drove a Cadillac Escalade V, which is a car you should like, because it's the loudest production car in the world. But I think I touched this. I wrote about it, but I touched the steering wheel, I think, 6 times driving from my house to Monterey, which is 300 miles.
Wow.
But Super Cruise is different in that it does allow hands-free driving. I don't think BlueCruise is allowing you to go all the way.
I think if it has a camera watching you, as long as your eyes are forward, that's the whole point of it.
Yes.
Wow.
You're right. You're right.
Wow.
So you just learn to like put the phone right below the camera and stare, right at the camera. There's a way to trick it, but it was 3 of the times I took the wheel because I was like, whoa, somebody's about to smash into me.
Yeah,
as happens. You live in California, you know how this works. And three of the times it did like get confused and quit, but still, like it was I've always said that Super Cruise is the best in the business, beats Mercedes, beats Tesla, all the really good systems. And this was I was like, whoa, this is even better than I remember. But I heard that this upgrade to BlueCruise is supposed to get it to that level.
Yeah, and BlueCruise has, and like Super Cruise, it depends on where you are and if they've
Works on a freeway.
If Ford and GM if they've mapped that area
That makes sense.
sufficiently. So like last year I tried to drive a GMC Sierra with Super Cruise out to Truck of the Year, and for some reason they had some weird. I was like, oh, it's in this small town called Los Angeles, and you didn't map any of these freeways. So they couldn't get it to go. This was the weirdest thing.
Yeah, that's all. But yeah, I mean, so just to really bore you to death. So that will be it's called level 2 autonomy, and it's just smart cruise control is all it is. You still have to have a human. You're still liable legally if if that car smashes into something. You were sitting behind the wheel.
Yeah.
The next step, which we're getting to, well, Mercedes is there. They actually sell it now in California. It's called level 3, and that means they assume the legal liability when the system's active.
Oh, wow.
So if it smashes into something, even though you're sitting in the driver's seat, Mercedes has the liability.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the difference. But it's dumb. It can't, level 2 and level 3, like it works on the freeway. Maybe it lets you change lanes, maybe not. It doesn't know where it's going. It's just like, all right, I can just drive in traffic really well. And they work.
All right, let's pivot here a little bit because we have John here speaking on behalf of the entire hot rodding universe. No, I mean, look. Let's
we couldn't get Freiberger. I told him that already. I asked Freiberger, and he literally was like, "No, I don't want to do it."
Well, okay, but
he was polite about it.
John's going to speak on behalf of hot rodders in general, and I have a lot of questions about the perception of EV. We've talked to you sort of personally, professionally, your experience and interest and in EVs. So let's open it up a little bit and talk about the audience, the people that you create content for, how they feel about it, and then also about the brand and its positioning. Where's Hot Rod in the automotive space, right? Because here's a couple of things, right? I know, and I'm very curious about your thoughts. I know that Tesla plaids go to drag events, right? And they're now. I just made this argument earlier today. Like the term hot rod it's always been about speed and performance, and from the earliest days was about being on the cutting edge. Like there's a ton of aerospace overlap, Inconel like exhausts and titanium valve springs and carbon fiber and all this stuff being used, exotic materials, right? And now like crazy stuff like Supra 2JZ engines are now like, I think they're legit. I think they've been accepted by the hot rod audience, just like LS swaps have been accepted by the tuner world. It's sort of bizarre, right? Yeah. And now again, plaids ripping dudes off at Friday night drags. That's happening. Yeah. So can you give me some context on where EVs are within the mindset of your audience?
Yeah, that's that is
how long you got?
I know. Because it is, I think, Johnny, like you said, the guy who hates the electric RAV4 is a large part of our
But he also hates the gas RAV4.
He would hate the gasoline RAV4, too. He probably just hates
At least good. At least it's not discriminating.
But go ahead.
But so I think there are people who, they just want V8 sound. They want, tire smoke and burnouts. And I get it all. That segment grew up in the 60s, probably 50s, 60s, 70s. I was born in 1972. I just turned 50 not too long ago. So I've got the end of that era before like the smog era and all that stuff. I think people after that demographic is the people we should be talking to if we do want to incorporate more, EV technology into Hot Rod Magazine.
EV only or new tech?
New tech. Okay. New tech, but incorporate.
Like fuel injection? Is that considered new or no?
Probably not anymore.
Okay.
Not anymore.
Turbochargers?
Yeah, that's still because that's been a thing because of the internet and especially YouTube. Like people doing YouTube videos on getting a junkyard 5.3 LS engine and putting a turbocharger on it and running 10s for like, 3 or 4 passes before the thing
Yeah.
So turbos are cool or okay.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but this is something I did kind of just learning. Superchargers have always been cool, but turbos always been like that's some funny foreign
That's European,
crap, right?
Right.
That's
Yes.
European.
But that has changed with drag racing and drag racing especially, and I think kind of fueled by some of these drag and drive events that Hot or Drag Week being the first of them. But a turbocharger makes a more drivable car for an event like that, like where you have to drive the car on the freeway, you have to drive it to the next venue. And so you can have 1,000 or 1,500 or 3,000 horsepower big block Chevy, but it's turbocharged, and you can do a few things to it, and you can drive it to the next stop.
It actually blows my mind that but I guess it speaks to how sort of emotional or interested in sort of the raw immediacy of a vehicle that the hot rod or the aftermarket audience is like. Because superchargers to me are like they're like caveman style. It's like, hey, here's a thing you're going to strap onto the engine that also is going to induce a parasitic loss, right? Yeah. It's considerable the higher output you go.
Yeah.
Whereas the beauty, the turbocharger is like the ideal. Hey, let's take wasted heat and energy and exhaust pressure, and let's put it into this thing that's after the whole combustion event. Yeah. And it's going to put more fuel and more air back into the engine. And if you tune it just right, you can make like an insane amount of power. Like that to me was like, why wouldn't the performance guy?
Well, why not both? I mean, supercharged and turbocharged.
Twin chargers.
Those are the way. That's the way to go.
I guess it's that
Volvo.
Because in the early days of turbochargers, right, you'd always have this delay, and it's like that doesn't work for drag racing, right?
That was always the rumor. And yeah, I think for like top fuel cars are obviously all the old school root style superchargers, and those are instant power.
Yes.
And also take a lot of power to drive the supercharger unit. But I think as for drag racing, when you can with the help of some electronics to like boost the turbocharger to spool it up before at the starting line, so that kind of changed, made it
Anti-lag, right?
Yeah, made it more functional for a drag racing situation, and that did change the
mind.
Yeah. But I know what you mean, like, the big polished cased 1471 root supercharger. They look cool, but I always see those as kind of like old technology. They add a lot of heat to the incoming air.
And like you said, they're just not drivable on the street. It's I've driven a couple cars like that.
They have that. They surge. Idle.
It's
so
tricky.
You can get a lot more power from a twin screw or like a Magnuson style supercharger, like Lucky has on his C10, and that makes a much more drivable, much more power.
Lucky Costa, host of our Hot Rod Garage show.
Yes. And so it's interesting. People ask me like what all kinds of stuff about hot rod, like how do you choose feature cars? How do you choose? What do you choose to write about? But it's cool because we can write about almost anything,
right?
From the 20s, the teens, all the way up till now.
Except it's got to be No, you can't.
Well, that's true.
Here's my years ago. Me and Jethro Bovington, we did a head-to-head. We brought a Ferrari and a Hellcat Red Eye to Phoenix to the drag strip.
Yeah.
And it was a bright yellow, $400,000 Ferrari, and like people were almost spitting on it. They were so mad it was there, and everyone's like, "Oh, the Hellcat!" They were like, "Yeah, it was an F8 green."
Well, that's true.
Then we did the first run, and I, without even being able to do a burnout, I popped off like a 10.8 or something like that, and suddenly everyone was like,
"Well, you were in the."
I was in the Ferrari, and everyone was like, "Whoa, is that stock?" I'm like, "Yep." They're like. And I go, NA. Like, what? I go, yep, just a V12 though. And everyone suddenly fell in love with it, but they were like you can't put even though here's a car that can do a 10-something quarter.
Sure.
You can't I mean, not that you would modify a Ferrari for hot rod, but you're not going to put a Ferrari on the car. You can't write about anything.
That's true.
Okay.
Yes, I should have prefaced that. Any American car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that because I want to hear this from again the horse's mouth here, the editor in chief of Hot Rod. tell me if I get the story straight, or just retell it for me. The what I heard is, and here we are talking to John in Hot Rod's 75th year. Hot Rod was born in 1948. It was the first magazine published by Robert E. Peterson, who became I call him like the Mark Zuckerberg of his day. Like this is like pre-internet. This is when he had at one point over 65, 69,
I think it was
70
75
magazines on the newsstand in the 80s, right? And he had everything with wheels, right? From all the car magazines. He had, MotorTrend. MotorTrend came the year after Hot Rod. It was born from Hot Rod's success. Hot Rod played an instrumental role in a whole ton of things, from SEMA, which was the Speed Equipment Manufacturers Association, right?
Yeah.
The birth of NHRA.
Yes.
Wally Parks, who is, when you win a race at an NHRA event, you get a Wally. It's named after Wally Parks. He was the founding editor of Hot Rod Magazine. Also SEMA, also the Southern California Timing Association, which is lake bed racing.
Yeah.
What am I missing?
That's about it. But that's enough, isn't it?
So that's the origin story of Hot Rod. And again, back in the day, from 48, post-war, this is something we talked about with Evan Lovett from LA in a Minute. Like the timing of Hot Rod's birth was really and success, and the success of all the magazines that Peterson started was no accident. It came after World War II. A bunch of American GIs came back with a GI Bill in their hand, some money in their pocket.
Yeah.
This joy of life, because they just gone through a world war, need for speed, auto industries,
war surplus, a lot of stuff lying around.
War surplus, industries going crazy. So the expansion. I mean, this is back in the day when cars, every model year, the Chevys would have a new body style, right?
But also remember, this didn't happen in New York City, because in LA we had big, long, straight roads.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Suburban, the growth of the explosion of the suburbs, which you live in one of the ones from LA. Torrance is one of the biggest ones. All the aerospace there, Gardena, Torrance area. This is where hot rodding was born, because you had the people, the cars, the interest, and also
plus El Mirage, a dry lake bed. You can go around.
The whole thing that I'm getting at is you had this growth from the founding year 48 to about the gas crisis, right? Where hot rod was on the bleeding edge of speed and performance. Everything that hot rod was trying to profile was, how do I make my American car, because it was a dominant brand around the world, how do I make these vehicles go faster? But then the gas crisis hits, and then you have V8s making like 120 horsepower, right?
Yeah.
And then things start to turn, and hot rod then stops looking forward at the cars in particular, still at the technology,
right?
But they kind of focus on the 60, 70, that sweet spot.
That's right.
Did I miss anything? This is mostly correct?
That's correct.
Okay. How does that fit in with, I mean, in those days, EFI, electronic fuel injection, was just starting to become popular, but also kind of like.
But also catalytic converters. You had a lot of stuff in the 70s, and in the Clean Air Act.
Right.
It was really kind of, I think would say, messed up new cars in the eyes of the typical hot rodder. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, where are we now with the hot rod audience in terms of looking at high tech? Like, I know carbon fiber has been adopted because it comes from racing, and some exotic metals and things. We talked about turbochargers and power adders, but
I don't think they're averse to it, because I think one thing that really helped was affordable self-tuning fuel injection kits that are available in the aftermarket. So a company called Phytech developed an early system that was very user-friendly. It almost didn't need a laptop. There were kits you could buy before them, but they were kind of complicated. That was fairly reliable. Then Holley built one. They've got several different versions now, but they came out with one. Actually made one that actually looks literally like a 4150 carburetor.
Yeah,
it looks exactly like a carburetor.
Yeah.
So you take your carburetor off, you put this throttle body carburetor on, and plug in an oxygen sensor and map sensor and a coolant temp, air intake temp, and plug it in, set a few parameters, and your car starts and runs. I think that was a huge barrier that allowed people to get across adopting fuel injection. And
fuel injection was, people were resistant because of the tunability. You couldn't just, like on a carburetor, change the jetting or whatever. Like this stuff at home you can't do by hand.
Yeah. because there's the term black box that we used to people call transmissions a black box because it's like I don't know what goes on in there. It's something goes in, something comes out.
Right.
But so I think for a long time.
But is that like a symptom of something else? I've heard a lot of people be like, "Man, if you buy an EV, the government could turn your car off."
I know. Well, I've heard all that too.
And I'm like, well, the government could, by the way, like turn your car off anytime they want now if your car is built in the last 20 years. Also, like if the government wants you, I wouldn't worry about being able to run. They'll turn your credit cards off when you get to the gas station. They'll shoot you. Whatever.
Right. That's the CIA listening device you're carrying around with you. Like they'll get you there first.
That's the truth, Johnny. I've heard all that stuff. I've even been guilty of thinking like, I don't want. What if I want to? I don't.
What if you want what? Like you're Kowalski and you got to run from the blue meanies?
Right.
I mean, what? It's a fantasy, right?
Right.
Is that part of it? It's like that's why. Like, is it the same thing? It's like I need an AR-15 in case like a guy breaks into my house. Like, is it the same?
I think there's just a certain mentality too that and it maybe just stemmed from personalization, where like this is mine. I don't want somebody to tell me what to do with it.
Right.
And it may just be that basic, because something I was thinking about the F-150 again. Like if I wanted to change the wheels and I put a different diameter tire on, does that mess up the calibration in the?
No.
So there's ways around that, right?
You just put a different wheel on, and it would just affect range, but it wouldn't hurt the
Good question,
computer.
though. Yeah.
No, because Rivian has 3 different size wheels. The Lightning has 5 different size wheels.
You're probably talking like maybe inch or 2 up in overall diameter. Like aftermarket's gonna go like, hey, I want to put 40s on my Lightning.
Well,
What's it
not
gonna do?
40s, no, but I think you're within the range of wheels. But
Sure.
I mean, with I believe from the Lightning you can go from 18 to 22s, I think, and I know the Rivian is 20 to 22s.
Yeah, but does that? I'm talking the change of an extreme change in the outer diameter of the tire, and the impact it would have on range, or just all the complicated math.
It's just hurt range.
Okay.
When I mean, I was warned by Rivian not to put because I changed the tires on my truck. I put on better off-road tires.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we've really optimized, and it was fine.
Okay.
It hurt range a little bit. Then they did an upgrade where suddenly I got more range, so it's back to where it was. So it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know because that might be a potential thing that someone's thinking. Like, I heard so-and-so's brother's cousin, he changed the tire diameter. He went to a lower profile or something, and it changed the overall revolutions per mile. That messed up the computer when it's thinking like it's going 70 miles an hour and you're really going 40 or whatever. Right. Like,
I mean, it might very well do that, but it'll still drive just fine.
But you can reprogram. I mean, it just if the person knows.
And again, I mean, like if you're gonna put 24s on your Lightning, like maybe I don't know, but like we've had him on a few times. But our friend Ben
Schaefer,
he owns Unplugged Performance. They mod Teslas, and they do everything but the motor. So they do suspension, they do wheels, tires,
they don't touch
aero.
the battery either.
They don't. Battery. Sorry, the powertrain.
Sure.
And there's a zillion reasons why they don't do that, but they just so. But it's also like, well, you can get one with 1,020 horsepower, so you don't really. Power is not the issue.
Exactly.
Brakes are they change the brakes.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So anyway, I was always curious, like, because for me, like, I understand how a carburetor works. I've had carbureted cars. I've worked on that. But my dad would always point out, he's like, SU Carbs, Smith Union. It's a British toilet manufacturer. That's all it is. You're just putting water down a hole, pissing water down a hole. And carburetors are stupid because, like you want fuel injection. It's much more efficient.
That sounds interesting.
That is. That's cool. I didn't know that about us.
SU. Yeah, Smith Union. It was a toilet company. And then they're like, oh, water going down a hole, Like,
Makes sense.
So it just, to me, it's like, I don't know. I get the appeal though, like a good carbureted NA or supercharged V8 is a thing of beauty. I mean, it is great. So I get both. I guess I never understood.
There's some prepper. I think there's some also post-apocalyptic prepper thing going on too. And I speak from somebody who I own an '87 Land Cruiser that's turbo diesel, and it does not need.
Yeah, it doesn't need any electronics.
Doesn't need anything.
Yeah,
like,
you can run it on cooking oil.
Exactly, biodiesel, right? Like
your wife won't let you drive it.
This is true.
But you're free.
When the AI takes over, man, like they're not going to get me with an electromagnetic pulse.
Except for the diesel pump, which is
exactly.
computer
There's no
controlled.
parts available for this thing because the the engine is from Japan, right?
Yeah,
So good
via
job there.
Canada,
What I should own is probably like an early 80s or late 70s F-150 or something, right? That you just go to any automotive parts store, or a Camry, to be quite honest, where you'd find parts for the rest of.
Sure.
But then you got to drive a Camry.
Yeah, exactly. But okay,
Sorry, Toyota.
We're kind of skirting the question here. So let me just ask it a different way.
We never did EVs at the drag strip.
Yeah. We'll get there.
Yeah.
What is hot right now currently for the hot rod audience? What are the primary vehicles that you guys cover, and then what is in the outlier space, which I expect again it's like a 2JZ, like a Toyota drag engine. That's interesting, but that's not an everyday kind of feature, right?
Yeah.
So what do you? I know it's LS, all the crazy GM crate stuff, and
basically Restomods, which is what our term is for taking something older and modernizing it, and so. People aren't, I would say, a large part of our audience is not averse to technology. And I think, too, it's been helped by the fact that new cars are so good. And I can say that. They do everything very, very well.
Yeah.
And so the drivability of a new car is amazing. A 400 horsepower car in the 60s was a
beast.
Yeah, it needed maintenance. It was maybe not that fun to drive. It was loud and rough, and now you can get a 500 horsepower Corvette. And
look, back to my Rivian for a second. When I turn off the rear motors, it becomes 410 horsepower front driver. That's economy mode.
That's amazing. Yeah, see,
that's conserve mode. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
So that puts it all into perspective. So even if a person were to say, "Oh, I hate new cars. I don't want one," you're around them, you're in them with friends, and you
daily driver,
right? You have something like that, and you're like, well, but it really is nice to have, brakes that function. So
AC,
right? AC. So the first thing I did when I got the C10 was get rid of the drum brakes. I mean, those are terrible to drive, especially here in Los Angeles.
Oh, come on, disc brakes are for cowards.
So,
my favorite bumper sticker ever.
That's good.
Just makes our we die like men, right?
It just literally just said it was on a '65 Plymouth Fury.
Oh, that's great.
Disc brakes, my friend Sean's Rogers race car, but disc brakes are for cowards. Yeah.
So the popular builds would be I don't even know, because I think like. I always think, hot rod, they're going to put like a 67 like Camaro on there, but those are like a fortune. No one's working on those really.
That's the stuff that still gets attention at car shows and stuff. A Camaro, a Mustang from the 60s, 70 Chevelle, up till about 72.
Explain the Chevelle. Okay.
That's cool.
I was at Barrett Jackson, and like these Chevelles were going for $300,000, and I'm like punching myself in the face, like, what is like? I don't understand this Chevelle. Like, the worst human being at my high school drove a Chevelle. That's my relationship.
That's hilarious.
So like, explain Chevelle.
Are they rare? They're not particularly rare, though, are they?
They're not.
Explain
no.
Chevelle. I gotta know. And I said something, and people on Instagram were like annihilating me about like, dude, you're so lame. But I get Camaro.
Sure.
I get Mustang.
Sure.
Icons of everything. But what's Chevelle?
I'm probably going to get annihilated too, because I prefer Impalas.
I
like the full size cars.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. But Chevelle is a thing.
It is yes. That's a 70 Chevelle SS 454 is like the iconic red with the black rally stripes would be the iconic.
Okay,
muscle
so
car.
it's just a desirability.
Yeah,
I would say a
Isn't
70 GTO is way cooler.
Let me just pause and say, I'm going to get crucified for this.
What?
Isn't the guy who appreciates that though? Isn't he going to die soon? And then the market's going to be flooded by all of the cars that have been selling at Barrett and Mecum and stuff.
Right.
I always think that the bottom is going to fall out of this. The hot rod collector hot rod, that auction market has exploded in the last 10 years. And it's like, you open up, you go to any of the sites and you see all these crazy, there's a lime green this with racing stripes and the blue that and that.
Yeah.
All that, these guys, I don't see a huge audience replacing that level of enthusiasm. And these cars are not investment grade. Like some people say they are, but they're not investment grade like Ferraris or the Italian, those exotics of.
But I hear the same thing about like, oh man, like no one cares about like, Packard, pre-war Packard, but still going. Like people are still into it.
I don't know.
I think it's a cultural thing though. I think this culture of hot rod does survive, and I think Chevelles survive because of that. These were just Chevelles on really horrible wheels going for 300. It was the wheels that were throwing me off. I was like, why are you on deep dish chrome 24s and for 300 grand?
Yeah, those don't look good to me either.
So bad. So bad.
That's a really good question, Ed, because we've seen just in my career the prices of these things just, skyrocket more than real estate, more than it is really crazy.
It's wild, yeah.
And there's so many of them. That's the thing that blows my mind. When you look at all the auctions that are going on in every different city, and you're like, dude, and you find the barn finds where like, oh, we just found another 30 of these. Like what? It's crazy.
So what does happen? Because you're right, the demographic of Hot Rod's audience is, I forget, but it's 60, so a little bit older than me, and it is a lot of the boomer age.
Right. Which is a huge blister, a huge bump
right.
in the population charts.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of replacement going on after that.
No. So what, someone like me, I can't afford a 70 Chevelle. Or what does my son, like he was not even into cars. Now he drives a Kia Forte. He drives.
Whoa.
He didn't want to drive before.
How do you feel about the Kia Forte?
I'm just happy he's in a car.
Okay, fair.
But
oh, that's got to be so hard. I have friends that are, journalists, so like
Sure.
their kids, like they just like don't get it, like don't even, does nothing.
And some of that I think is just it's a sort of a cultural thing where in this the era of the GIs coming back from World War II, their children saw their dads and their fathers or uncles or their family. I mean, it's not exclusive to men, but working on cars, having something, going to cruise nights and all that stuff. And I think that's just sort of diminished over the years.
Right.
And it's been replaced by, I guess these days, YouTube,
video games.
Although, look, I will just say, the cars and coffee scene in Southern California is popping wild, crazy.
It's a lot.
The one at the last Sunday of the month at Griffith Park at the merry-go-round. It's taken over like an extra parking lot. It's so big. I went down to Orange County to this place, the Finish Line. You heard about this? Absolutely bonkers. Like the amount of, the dollar level of the cars there is astonishing. Like oh look, there's a D-type that Sterling Moss drove that some dude just keeps in his hangar. But like it was so packed, it was crazy, and it's like every Sunday they do that. So I think the cruise nights, because the cops always harass, and so now it's just okay. You park the cars, you do it from 7 to 9 a.m. and then you go home, and the cops don't care. And
that's an interesting thing. That's cool because I've seen that when I first moved here. I moved here 20 years ago, and coming from Ohio, I thought that stuff would be everywhere, every night, and I was really disappointed.
Right.
But that's changed, and it's changed recently, I think, because of since COVID. But
COVID and social media was like, is there anything to do?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I can go stand in a parking lot and look at cars.
Because I saw you there a couple times with the Malibu Country Kitchen. I was going there all the time, and then the cops.
I know. Well, that was the idiot landlord. But yes, that was a great spontaneous, unplanned event. Which it's too bad it went away.
So if the editor-in-chief of Hot Rod Magazine cannot afford, bemoans a $300,000 Chevelle, what do you? Are we into the 80s?
Yes.
With like Fox body Mustangs and stuff, and the F. What are the F body?
F body.
Yeah.
Camaros?
We can put a full-size pizza on the dash.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so then it starts to, because then, and it's difficult because I have to wrap my head around this all the time. Like, and those are the cars I saw in high school, but I think I was also more accepting of like Japanese sports cars too at the time. So
this is in Ohio.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't mean to use myself as a.
Oh, we're talking about you. This is your episode.
But just sort of as a barometer, my friends. I didn't have a lot of friends who were into cars. So I would seek out car shows and locally, but I was, I did like Japanese cars. I used to subscribe to Sport Compact Car. I went to Subaru for a long time. I think you get some of that brand loyalty, like dogmatic brand loyalty, does diminish as you get into younger audience. And so
part of that is the manufacturer's fault, because to be honest, in the 80s and 90s, the domestics were not building. Were not building great cars.
They weren't good.
And the parents, you don't blame the kid if the parent, like we grew up in my earliest memories were a Chevrolet the station wagon. Mm-hmm. And then after that,
Caprice.
The Caprice Classic, and just the script, the whole thing, the vinyl seats. I remember like blowing fart noises on that. and then, but it broke down too much. My parents we ended up being mostly a Toyota and Honda family going forward, and that's like all of my friends, and that's where that's the cars they buy.
My dad was always into like European sports cars, and then they would break so much he got sick of it. He bought a Z, and he really liked his Datsun Z.
Yeah.
But then my sister and I came along. He had a Civic CVCC that he loved, but it was too small. But he was like, if you're going to buy domestic, you only buy General Motors because Ford and Chrysler are garbage. And I was like, oh, okay. But meanwhile, our GM cars broke every minute of every day.
Sure.
And then he just switched to I forced him to buy an Integra when I was like 10 or 11. Yeah. And he just loved it. He went all Japanese after that.
Because of the value.
Although he went back to Jeeps. Before he died, he got really into like Cherokees and Grand Cherokees. But
I had the same experience. My dad we were always GM. My dad had Chevrolet. His last Chevrolet was a 1980 Chevette.
My dad had a 80 Malibu that was the worst car. It was so bad. It was so bad.
He replaced the Chevette with a 86 Mazda 323.
Oh yeah,
and that's the car I learned how to drive on. Yeah. And 5-speed. It was nice. It was reliable.
You took your driver's test in that?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hatchback.
Is that a deep dark secret that's just now been revealed?
It might be. My mom had a.
But it's sorry. It's
cool.
just funny. Like I remember, like Freiberger on Instagram posted that he once owned a Toyota FJ Cruiser.
No, not an FJ Cruiser, an original Land Cruiser.
Was it a Land Cruiser?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's what I meant.
FJ40.
Sorry, FJ40.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Toyota Land Cruiser FJ40. That's what I meant. And like people were like, "What?"
Yeah, I know.
Right. Needle skips, right?
But it was like if you grew up in Southern California, Toyota was sort of the domestic because they were headquartered here.
Sure.
Detroit was far away, Yeah. Like Detroit, Mazda, Honda, Nissan, who went to Tennessee, and Toyota went to Texas. That was our local. It made sense in a way.
Yeah. So. Well, you made an excellent point about the build quality of the cars and how they were stagnant. The technology in my pickup, the 67, is almost the same as in 93. If you take away the fuel injected, the TBI fuel injected engine, it's all the same.
Yeah, and I believe General Motors still made a carburetor up through 96. There's an Oldsmobile that had a carburetor.
In passenger cars, the 86, and then they replaced it with TBI.
Oh,
but then,
86?
but
throttle
the
body
trucks,
TBI throttle body injection.
Throttle body.
Look at me. I'm the acronym king. Yes.
But they did hang on in the trucks. And I forget when that ended, but it may have been like 88. They changed up body style of the full size pickup to the one I had, the GMT 400, the OBS they call it now. But I think that was the first fuel injected.
I'm gonna look. I feel like this is a trivia question I've answered before. But go ahead.
But I bet you're right though, because I do remember. I had an 86 Caprice that had a computer-controlled carburetor on it. It was the electric quadrijet. And that was like, what is this thing? When you can get Japanese cars that had fuel injection.
Actual fuel injection.
It actually worked, too.
Well, this is the era. They called it
86. You were,
that's okay.
The Subaru Justy was the last carbureted car sold in America.
Oh, I remember that.
They call it the malaise era. It was the era when a lot of the domestics, but GM egregiously were like run by accountants.
Yeah.
And they were looking at cost cutting and volume sales through like not being the General Motors of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, where they're all about let's make them really like
space
awesome.
race.
Yeah, space race, like jet age looking, and then have the technology to match. It was like, hey, how do we maximize the profits out of these things?
Yeah, and I had my first car was an '85 Pontiac station wagon, which had it was a weird engine. It was a Canadian. It was like a 304 or something weird.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But it made 130 horsepower.
Oh, yeah.
From a 5-liter V8, which is like
now you're cooking.
It's like It's crazy. Like, and I remember like when we got the Integra, it was like a 1.6 liter that made 113. And I'm like doing the math. I'm like, wow, our Pontiac really doesn't make a lot of power per liter.
So because I came from the aftermarket, and it's always like as the farther you go, every day goes by, older cars become older, but also more affordable. So that's like a window is moving, right? So the window of cars that are cool and being worked on by Hot Rod is slowly advancing into this terrible era. If it's mostly domestics, are there any gems? Like you get like what's like a new Hot Rod? I know Fox Body is kind of now kind of the it child.
Grand National.
Grand National's always kind of been.
Yeah,
cool,
they've always been cool. Yeah.
Is there anything that's like you're just like I can't believe we're like people are interested in building these things and we're doing articles on fill in the blank or no?
I bought 78 Malibu, which was the first year of the G body Malibu, the downsized.
The one my dad had.
Yeah,
Horrible car. His was also gray on gray. He bought it for his business. It was horrible. It was good.
And I was still with CarCraft at the time, and people liked that. I bought it at a used car lot in Akron. My son rode back home with me to Los Angeles. $5,000.
Okay. Seems like
for that?
Something you overpaid.
By about 4,000.
Velour interior? What was it?
It had the cloth, the mouse fur, whatever you call it.
How stained as a percentage was that?
It was actually not bad because it had like 56,000 miles on it. So it wasn't, it had been sitting in
a 4-speed?
It was a 3-speed automatic on the column, which was a turbo hydromatic 200, which was like the light duty version of the turbo 350, which is like,
standard,
which would put up with maybe, 300 pound-feet of torque, maybe, 200, the 200C. But what the benefit that GM cars have is like the interchangeability. Yes. And so like the steering box was the same as like a 70 Chevelle or basically, so you can put all that, you can upgrade the car. The spindles, the front spindles are the same. So you could put, if there's an aftermarket upgrade available for, a 70 Chevelle, you could probably fit it on that Malibu or, the technology, the parts are there. So you can take something that was like, ugh,
Okay.
And do something with it. And so the car becomes I don't like to use canvas, but it becomes a thing. Where
it's a frame. You can hang stuff
This is the appeal of GM in the aftermarket in general. It's like a huge Lego kit.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go to somebody else, a smaller, like even the Japanese car, that was sort of the challenge of the tuner, the Japanese tuner industry, is that nothing was available.
Yeah.
Unless you called some weird dude in Japan who might have something, or you had to go take something from another. The origin story for the Japanese tuner market was Todd Kaneko, this famous Turbo Todd, he was doing Ford Pinot work, and that's where he learned like a lot of the turbocharging back in the day, because this is where you start, and then you can gradually move into the Japanese brands and then start creating stuff. But a lot of it owes the theory and the practice to the hot rodding. The CarCraft, like those titles, like the things that were going on there.
Yeah.
So a G-body Malibu.
Yeah, and G-body was made up until '87, I believe, in the Monte Carlo SS and the Grand Prix and the Oldsmobile Cutlass too. So you could get some of those were cool looking. The Aero Coupe Monte Carlo, that was like the last 2 years of the Monte Carlo, and those are actually kind of like worth some money.
Interesting.
And Pontiac had a version also, the Grand Prix. I don't remember what they call it, but 2+2 or something, but it had that sloping back window the Aero Coupe did.
Okay.
The Caprice Coupe was way cooler, but anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I
love that.
Anything from Ford? Like, will you see like the
Thunderbird?
The Thunderbirds, and actually we had I've seen them at various car shows recently, but that like the Bill Elliott Thunderbird, I call it the '88 Thunderbird.
Oh, I mean those are cool looking cars. They are cool. I mean they were garbage cars. They were so bad, but they were cool looking. Especially what was the one that had like it looked like it had a supercharger, had like a hood bulge.
But they had the turbo coupe. So that was the four-cylinder. I think it was the Lima four-cylinder turbo.
Yeah. That's a cool, and the sealed headlights. It
Right.
was really cool.
You know, it's
looking.
okay if you talk about Mopar stuff too.
I know. I was just
Anything? Is
thinking
there
of, like,
anything?
it's hard to say
Shelby
because
GLH?
it might be, but so much of Chrysler stuff was front wheel drive.
Yeah,
And-
K car.
Yeah. And I think I've already mentioned 2 NASCAR race car, versions. I think NASCAR helped a lot with just the look. I mean,
that was Dale Senior's car, right? It was a Monte
Right,
Carlo,
right,
the Dominator. Yeah.
yeah. And so, you see those things, and you're like, okay, well, here's this, 85 Monte Carlo with a V6, and it's like, but it could be that. And so if I lowered it, if I put the big wheels on it, stuff. I think that kind of helped where Chrysler didn't have anything. They had the front wheel drive stuff. They had, I remember,
front wheel drive Daytona.
Right. I had a cousin, or I have a cousin who had I forget, I think it was a Dodge Shadow front wheel drive, and it was a turbocharged, probably the.
So that's interesting. So for hot rod, one of the no fly ever zones will be front wheel drive. Do you think?
Probably. That's kind of, if I were to stick to a rule personally, it's front wheel drive is and it's funny because
Or wrong wheel drive.
Can I play dumb for a second?
Sure.
Like, what's so bad about front wheel
I
drive?
know, I kind of wondered if you were going to ask me that because I thought it
I'm
was going
playing
to come
dumb. I'm playing dumb.
up. I hate I hate to say it, but front wheel drive burnouts don't look good.
Okay.
That's
Fair. Yeah. I'm kind of playing dumb. Like, there are great front wheel drive cars.
Sure.
There's a lot fewer of them than great rear wheel drive cars. You
Yeah.
have to go in like, we're going to make a great front driver.
Yeah.
They're largely forgettable
All right.
and it's for packaging reasons.
yeah.
There are front wheel drive burnouts can be cool.
No.
Rear wheel drive burnouts
In reverse.
are cooler, and there's many more of them.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, all wheel drive burnouts are the best.
Yes, but that's you
Yes.
need a lot of power.
Yeah.
You need about 2,000 horsepower.
Yeah.
All right. So you're saying we will never see Hot Rod Magazine do a Ford Probe or a Dodge Intrepid or
No.
No.
I'll say that.
Well-
why would you?
Yeah. Well, that's the
Probe is a pretty cool looking car.
But not for hot rod.
I don't know.
I'm
reaching here because we eventually got to go back to so
EV drag race.
let's get to so this is a good frame up. Then we kind of understand where Hot Rod is now and what you guys are covering, and let's talk about though the adoption or the interest in EVs. And let me just preface this by a terrible thing I asked you and the Hot Rod team to do last year. We talk about sacred cows.
Oh,
2 years ago.
yeah,
2 years ago,
2 years
right?
ago.
2 years ago, which is there's a project. Hot Rod's longest running project car is called Project X, and it is a
57?
57 Chevy.
Bel Air
Tell
Coupe.
me, it's a it's not the
210.
210.
But it's got Bel Air trim on it now.
yeah. So it's a 210. It's yellow. It has. I asked you guys to count. You couldn't even tell me the hard number because nobody remembers how many different engines it's had over the years and different modifications.
Yeah.
But it was famously in American Graffiti.
Hollywood Nights.
Hollywood Nights.
That's okay.
How do I get my history straight? Right, Hollywood Nights. It was a movie car. It's been a project car. It's been on the cover numerous times. It was the legend has when Peterson Publishing insured it for $1 million. Right.
Right.
And up until 2 years ago, every single engine had been Chevy.
Had been an engine.
Been an engine. Period.
Right.
And then I asked you to do the unthinkable because GM had announced an E-Crate motor program and turned the car from gas powered to electricity powered for the 2022 SEMA show.
Yes.
And how did that go over with the audience? Really well, right? Really,
Terribly. I went down like the Titanic, and then the submersible.
The Titan. Did it go down worse or better than you thought?
It went down about how I thought.
So I want to
Wow.
just if you're watching at home,
Do you have
like,
any emails that he was not copied on you could forward me just for my own personal use?
Look, John's smiling. He's laughing. We're laughing. We're colleagues. John was great about it. By the way, he never said, I whatever grumbling about doing it never came to me, except maybe secondhand. But good partners in doing it, and GM was a good partner in doing it. Like they actually paid for the whole thing, and we got Vic Cagnazzi Racing to help do the install. I will say I was at the debut at SEMA in 2022 when it rolled out in Chevy's booth, next to that dang Hoonigan car with that 632
Yeah.
big block
Yeah.
abomination. But I thought people were generally, at least to my face and to the face of the GM engineers and Cagnazzi, quite respectful.
Sure.
That,
Yeah.
You know, maybe that's just you don't want to slag people
Yeah.
to their face.
Yeah.
But the response, at least in person at SEMA, was like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, it's,
And John, what was the response like outside of SEMA?
yes.
Pretty terrible. It's funny. I do want to preface all of this by saying we work on cars. We're not, it's easy to get really bent out of shape about something that ultimately doesn't matter that much. So,
Thank you.
I understand, and actually I kind of appreciate the passion, because otherwise I wouldn't have a job.
Right, right.
I wouldn't have a job at all. Right. So I get it, and that's really cool. None of us need to be doing this, putting electric motors into 57 Chevys or any engine into a 57 Chevy.
What a
these days.
privilege, right? Yeah. We could be in a salt mine or something.
Yeah, I argued for, at the time when I first heard about it, and I didn't know where the impetus was coming from, I argued for, let's do anything but Project X. Let's do that to anything but Project X. Only because that's one of those things where it's like, the RAV4 guy was like, oh, you just destroyed that car.
Right.
If we wanted to get our audience on board with something, you almost have to. My argument, I don't know if it would have worked, but my argument, if you guys remember Steve Mignanti, I think in the 80s, when he did the Caddy hack, and that's the car, that premise has been done a few different times in Hot Rod, but they took I think it was an Eldorado, and they started taking stuff off the car. So basically, at the end, it was just a bare frame going down the drag strip.
Sport Combat Car famously
ripped
redid
it off
that.
with,
ripped it off with a Nissan
Sentra.
Oh,
cool.
It was great. It went. I mean, it dropped like the quarter mile dropped from
like 4 seconds.
More. It went from like 15 to like 6. It was crazy.
No, I think it was 6.
It was fast. It was.
But I was arguing, like, let's do something like that with a Bolt or a Volt or something that you could do. You could put a motor in the back and so it's like twin drive or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if that would have worked. And I think Chevrolet also wanted to have something like a halo vehicle, like Project X, because they had worked on it, I think it was about 8 years prior, where they turned it into a pro touring car with the Corvette stuff on it.
Yes.
So I get it. And, what are you going to do? So... It did all that stuff. I think it would have been better. I know there was some drivability and tuning issues that they had trying to tune the thing at Milan. I think they were trying to run it at, and it ran about mid 12s or low 13s. And
lift the front end though. That's kind of cool.
It did,
right?
yeah. And I can, after driving that F-150, I can understand like it's. That's what everyone
Instant
says
torque.
about instant torque for an electric motor. I get it. So I can see why I would do that. It would have been cooler if it went 10s, maybe. But then you're getting into, that opens up its own can of worms with safety equipment needed, roll bars and stuff that they probably weren't willing to do with the car. But
running 12s in the quarter mile Project X, probably 4,000 pound vehicle.
Probably, somewhere around.
With the battery.
Well, I mean...
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't
but
even know how big the battery was.
Interior stripped. It wasn't caged though.
Right.
Is there what's the context for that? Is that impressive? 12s for that car. Is it the fastest it has gone or no?
It could be. Yeah, no, that's slow.
Yeah, that thing.
That's
it had gone faster before.
It done 9s, right?
Well, I don't know actually what it's.
Okay.
It had a big block Chevy in it for a while.
I feel like there was one. I remember it did like a 9.8 or something. It was pretty good.
The last version Hot Rod Garage did with a supercharged LS engine in it, and I think it still had that 6-speed, the Richmond 6-speed manual transmission. I'm not sure if they ever ran it, and I should know this. I'm sorry, I don't. But it probably would have done at least 12s with that combination. Okay. It was a root supercharger. It should have, it probably should have been a little bit quicker. But the problem with Project X is no one's ever really followed through with it for the last 20 years that we've owned it. Right. It's just sort of like we do something to it, we'll install a part, and then it just kind of sits, and it doesn't get refined or tuned or whatever to make it to optimize it.
Yeah, the goal has always been like a SEMA show or at this point. But well, let's get to what you guys did subsequently. But yeah, you're right. He hits that goalpost, and everyone kind of forgets about it.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess to your initial question, people were upset with that, and.
Like crazy upset.
They were,
If
yeah.
you've never heard of Project X before, like that car really comes on my radar. I know it exists because I see it in the garage at work. But like the outrage of taking, ripping its heart out and putting it in a robot engine or whatever.
Way to go, John.
Jeez. Way to go, Edlo. Like it was resonating outside of the normal channels.
Yeah.
So it was really sacrilegious. And like I said, even I was kind of like, why would you do that? But,
Hey.
yeah, well,
Just spell our name right. You'll be fine.
That car goes back to 1964.
Yep.
It's company owned. That was McMullen Argus. It was a popular hot rodding project car for a long time. Then we acquired, Prime Media acquired us all. And then it was still PHR until PHR went away. Then Street Rodder and Super Chevy kind of did a hybrid version of, and then Hot Rod Garage took it. So it's kind of been this like orphan that's sort of floated around since PHR went away.
And what's in it now? Because I know the electric motor came out.
Yeah, okay, well,
Let's talk about that.
So people now say that the engine that should have been installed 2 years ago.
Well, to be fair, when we got wind of, I'm trying to remember how my dumb idea. I'll admit it's fine. So not all ideas are
you
great.
got a lot
Most
of
of mine are awesome.
Got a lot of clicks. Yeah. Most are great.
So the GM Chevy Performance, whatever, came to us with the E-Crate motor idea, and so we kicked it around there. They did not tell us. At least I had no idea about the 632. I don't think you guys. That 632 dropped like a week before SEMA, and then they gave it to the Hoonigan dudes to put in that F-body Camaro, which was 80s cool. Like Hoonigan tries to adopt that 80s style, and they did a good job with it. It looked fine, but yeah, I also probably would have said, well, why didn't you tell us about that? Right?
Yeah, that was disappointing.
But if you think about it, Hoonigan can't do. Who cares if they put E-Crate into anything?
True. That's a good point,
right?
Well, they also, by the way, Hoonigan went through the same thing. They did the electric Gymkhana. They had that Audi.
Yeah.
And like I remember talking to Scotto about it. Oh, beyond roasted. People, but he had, I can't remember what he said. It was this great thing, and he just said that like the way humans view. I'm gonna get killed for not knowing what it's called, but like you see the world through your window, and we built an audience that only looks through this window, and we did something that goes through this window, and they just couldn't see it, no matter how cool it was, no matter that like they went through like 10 times the amount of tires they normally go through. Like it was electric, therefore could not be good. Yeah.
Well,
so
but
they went through the same thing.
The point being, I don't know that I would have pushed or lobbied so hard if I had known that this enormous engine was going to be launched at the same show. I don't feel like I was had per se. I understand.
You were totally had.
I understand where Chevy was coming from with E-Crate, but also look, we've just talked about it, there's a long history of hot rodding, advancing the state of performance, and putting the latest and greatest powertrains in it, and Project X being the exemplar of that. Yeah, so in my mind, an EV powertrain makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but you're not the editor-in-chief of
F the haters.
Magazine.
I know. So, but all the wrongs in the world have been righted because
there's a 632, ZZ 632 in it from Chevrolet Performance right now.
And what's the power output of that?
1,004 horsepower.
Nice.
1,004.
Yeah, and it debuted recently at
Power Tour, Howard Power Tour,
cool.
just a few weeks ago.
A couple weeks ago, and you guys. You drove it. You didn't drive the whole thing in Project X, but you drove it around.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much does a 632 weigh?
About 800 pounds. Yeah.
The whole build of Project X getting the 632 was on an episode of Hot Rod Garage.
Yeah.
Lucky and Alex. And did you drive it?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Nope. But I rode it.
Will you drive it?
Probably. I'd like to.
How did it run at Power Tour?
Pretty good.
Do you remember the times?
They didn't run it down.
No.
They didn't take it on the track.
Okay,
and that was we talked about that. Again, it was kind of in a rush to get the car done. They filmed the episode of Hot Rod Garage in a week, and then Lucky and I worked on the car for almost 2 weeks. Not every day straight, but to get it I mean, there's a lot to do.
Yep.
Um,
Wouldn't be if it had an electric motor in there. You just plug it in. You know what I'm saying? I'm just kidding. Is that like loud and lumpy idle on the whole thing?
It is. The whole car shakes. I mean, it gets that. I think a lot of the audience loves that visceral. I mean, even if you're not sitting in it, you see that the car does sit there and shake.
And noise. Noise is a huge
Checks
part of
all
it. I
the
mean,
noise.
it's like you look at like a lot of what's going on with F1. You know, the cars just don't sound good. And then, you know, because of the ease of social media, they keep posting like, you know, here's what the V10 sounded like. And it's like one of the most glorious noises there is.
Yes, but the current F1 cars sound way better than anything coming out of Formula E.
Oh, yeah. Formula E sounds terrible. Yeah. It doesn't, like, you can't say terrible. It doesn't have a sound.
Yeah,
There's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing.
A bunch of worrying.
Okay, so then, and the purpose of taking, if you know what Power Tour is, it's a city-to-city tour. 5 cities.
5 cities, 5 days.
5 days. It's crazy. It's hot. I went 2 years ago, and it was like roasting hot, and all these people drive around, and a lot of them are like non-air conditioned.
They don't have windows.
Right. And they take over
no glass.
Take over like stadiums and like fair parks and all this cool stuff. This is it's a crazy road trip.
And this was the biggest year ever. This
is what I hear.
6,000?
Yeah.
6,000 cars.
That's
And
wild.
6,000 people go point to point, and you know it's a rolling kind of fun like carnival style atmosphere. The Project X with the big block back in it was the Chevy's booth, right? Is that right, or whose booth?
We had it right next to our main stage.
Main stage.
Yeah.
And the response was
very positive.
Very positive.
Very positive. I personally got patted on the back. That's thank you.
You're welcome. See, I set you up.
How much power did Electric Project X make?
400,
something like that.
Oh,
I forget.
So it wasn't even
I
a
don't
lot
know
of
if it was
power.
the Lyric. I forget what motor they used.
Yeah.
It came from the Lyric.
Yeah, they wouldn't tell us what the batteries were in it. This is all 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It was like Ultium, I think, the battery.
Oh, was Ultium?
Yeah, I think they
or it was Bolt. It was probably
I
Bolt
think it was
battery.
Bolt batteries, and
yeah,
they didn't
okay.
want to say it because Ultium.
Right.
They only want to talk about Ultium, so
Okay.
they were really like, "We're not going to talk about what's batteries."
Okay.
And some GM guy is like eye rolling us right as he hears this. He's like, "You guys don't even." know.
I don't even. Yeah,
Sorry.
I don't even know what Ultium means. I know it's a word I read a lot. It's hard to spell, and you know.
Okay.
All right, but let's get back to, since we're dancing around it, EVs at the drag strip, the way a Hot Rod Magazine subscriber, in other words, a Plaid, which you can go buy right now. We can go buy one right now.
Right.
Does a 9.3 on concrete, not on prep surface. Prep surface, it's quicker.
140 grand out of the box.
Yeah, something like that. 100. They change the prices every day. Lucid has a thing called the Sapphire coming out in a month and a half. We did a test of a pre-pro one, 9.2 on concrete. Runs a 9.2.
All-wheel drive.
And you know what you
non-prep
do?
surface.
The first time I drove it, I should say, I ran a 9.2. And I put my foot on the brake, I put my foot on the throttle, and lifted. And that was it. And just,
Yeah.
So, is that cool? That's not cool?
It's funny, Johnny, because it's like, that's something we're going to have to struggle with. Like, there was a car on Drag Week last year. That's our other event of a week long. It's basically a 5-day drag race from track to track. There was a Tesla. I don't know which model, but
Probably a Model S Plaid. Those are the quick ones.
I think it was
Yeah.
a Plaid.
Yeah, those are the quick ones.
And I talked to the guy a little bit because I'm like, well, are you a pariah here?
Yeah.
Are people like, throwing stuff at you as they're driving by? He's like, no, everyone's been pretty cool. We're kind of like, he made it sound like the people who were interested were kind of like, like, is it okay if I go talk? And he wanted to make sure their friends weren't looking. They go talk to the guy about his car.
Right.
But, I think that's kind of a good thing. We don't have a class that the Tesla actually fits in. So he ran, it wasn't exhibition, but he was in the Street Machine Eliminator, which is kind of it's a bracket. So you have to target your ET and then you just drive to it. So you're not like, the car might be able to go quicker, faster. But the way the class is set up, it's different brackets.
EVs are. We just did a story on this. Eric Tingwell, our testing editor, took our Lucid out to some a weeknight drag race and bracket raced it, and because they can be very consistent. And
So this one decided for no reason to run a half second quicker for no reason, and
Right.
and they couldn't do it again.
But it's a great. Actually, got a lot of feedback, good and bad, about how EVs kind of take. To your earlier point, there's a little maybe they take the fun out of it because it's so easy to go fast, or it's just a little soulless.
That's just what I was gonna say. Is if anyone can get it, well, anyone can do that, and I think that's maybe some of the criticism that people say, and where's that coming from? Is that like jealousy, or is it some sort of like you didn't have to work for that? I had to work for
Sure.
I don't know if there's a little bit of that. I think, and you hear the phrase "built not bought."
Mm-hmm.
Sure, yeah.
Some people take that, and
that's big in the Lego community as well. Go ahead.
some people take that as a point of pride, and I understand that. There's that guy he has a checkbook car. You swipe your card, someone built it for you,
Right.
Or you went to the dealership and bought a $100,000 car that runs low nines.
But that could be said about anything, including that Ferrari you mentioned.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Well, like I said, though,
rich guy over
everyone
here.
just hated it until they saw the number, and they were just like, and I don't say everybody, but like the 6 or 7 people that came up to talk to me about it, was suddenly their face had changed from everyone else, and they're like, "What is that?"
Right.
And there was like that a 10.8, like out of the box, like, and everyone could see I couldn't do a burnout.
Yeah.
I tried, and it was like it just couldn't. It's not programmed to do burnouts, and so I think like you got to respect nines.
You
Like,
do.
I don't.
I'd argue you could say the same thing about these new Hellcat Dodges, because
Yeah.
you put whatever they cost, $90,000, and you have a Challenger or Charger that runs tens. Like, that's pretty crazy, but but they're accepted.
Well, you got to be really good to make one go 10.
Okay,
So
well,
there is some driver skill.
Okay,
Yeah.
Well, I speaking as I don't.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
so call it 11s, like just some hack getting in the driver's seat, like yeah. But those are accepted in our community.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just because they make the right sounds at that
They
point.
make a great sound. And it's
Good
that
marketing.
formula, right? Front engine, rear
Yeah,
drive,
yeah.
V8, supercharger.
Yeah.
Cool badge.
Screaming, looks good.
Yeah.
Cool
Yeah,
man.
Yeah, that's the word hell.
Well,
I like that.
but we're talking about stock cars, which is not actually the hot rod audience. So there's the performance that Johnny's talking about out of the box, built not bought. I get that. I get the criticism, but that doesn't spark any kind of like, well, how do I make it faster?
Right.
Hey, start ripping seats out. Yeah.
Right.
Wait,
And-
there's not a lot. To your point earlier, like kind of like with the black box electronics, how much can you do, right?
right.
So
That guy with the Tesla at Drag Week last year, when I was talking with him, he's like, it was interesting. I thought it was interesting because he's like, the state of charge will affect how fast it goes. So he's to compete in his bracket, he couldn't be full throttle the whole track if it was fully charged. And as he figured out if it was like 70% charged by the time he got to the track, then he could. And I think he worked it out in his head. So if he knew if it was like 75% charge, he could full throttle and at the drag strip and basically be within his bracket. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I was like, okay, there's some thought.
Although I think that's a Tesla battery management issue more than just an overall EV, because we did a thing with a Lucid, the Grand Touring Performance, which is the 1,050 horsepower version.
Wow.
Where we ran 10 quarter miles back to back, and by back to back I mean we went down there, made a U-turn, came back and launched.
Yeah.
And the results were 10.0, 10.0,
Wow.
10.0, 10.0.
Wow.
10.1, 10.1, 10.1, 5 times, and then the last one was 10.2.
Wow.
And the charge dropped a bit, not a ton, but so Lucid for whatever reason has their thermal management worked out.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So that may be something that could appeal to somebody who likes to tinker, or tires, sure. I think I can't remember what tire.
weight loss, like
Yeah.
I believe I'm bullish that because this is human nature to mess with things. Like somebody somewhere, maybe it's the next generation of kiddos on their computers, they're going to figure out a way to like open source or crack these systems, and you're going to get some wild stuff. And stuff's going to blow up, and people are going to hurt themselves.
Well, but even we had BC on last episode. He was talking about he's changing the bearings on the motors. Like he's
that's
forget
interesting.
Forget
Okay.
about the software.
That's interesting.
He's changing out the hardware of the electric motors.
That's interesting.
Yeah, he's pretty hardcore. Well, let me ask you this, and again, I'm look, I have talk about a personal carbon footprint. Mine's gigantic. I'm a hypocrite. I get that. I'm not perfect. Newsflash.
But it's mostly airplanes. It's not cars. It's all the planes. It's all the planes you fly around. No, it's true.
Well, there's also that. I've done plenty with cars. I
yeah, okay.
I mean, I went. We did an episode.
Let's talk about your cruise ship habit too. Jesus. No,
I went on one cruise once. I did not enjoy it. But you look at I have a child, you have a child, he has a child. Like CO2 in the atmosphere is bad for the human race. Like Mars doesn't have any. It's fine. Put as much CO2 you want on Mars. There's no life to affect. But like. Is there? I mean, I know this is literally the antithesis of hot rod, but do we ever care? Like, boy, like
does the hot rod care about the hoax of climate change? You mean? Zing!
Yeah. Well, yeah. Weird weather. It rained for 6 months straight in L.A.
That would be a hard case to make to the audience.
But do
I care?
Like,
I do.
I gotta get. I'm gonna save. I'm gonna
put me on the spot.
I'm gonna save you.
I wanted a hard hitting question.
No, I'm gonna save you.
There's no saving here.
There's just 100%.
No one gets out alive.
No. I thought we talked about this. Like, you could argue that the aftermarket, particularly the guys who are into fixing up old cars, are the greatest environmentalists because they're using, they're working on vehicles that are already made. It's a sunk cost, basically. Like, the best, the best car you can buy is a used Prius from an environmental perspective. So all the people out there pushing
still burns
Teslas.
Still burns
no,
gas.
but in terms of all the manufacturing, everything that went into it, like there's a strong argument to be made that we should stop producing new cars and just work on and rehabilitate and drive and make the most efficient. I'm not talking about going doing burnouts.
I wouldn't
and
say
wheel
a
stands.
strong argument. There's an argument. I'd say it's
but the
a middling
existing
argument.
this throwaway
you crash
culture,
a lot of economies.
You want to get sure, but you want to talk. You want to blow people's heads off. You're like. This whole culture that we have.
Remember the last time Germany financially imploded? Not good, Ed. Not good.
The throwaway culture that we have, where things are just chucked because they lost the newness after a couple of years.
Yeah.
Like this whole the idea that you lease a car for 3 years and then get rid of it. That's just terrible.
Yeah.
Spoken from the guy who's works for the New Car magazine.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
You're also a hypocrite. Yeah.
I'm 100%. So.
Well, I'm not trying to evade your question, Johnny, because I do. It's hard because. You have to accept, or in my head, like I have to accept, okay, burning gasoline has an effect, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Now, am I opposed to putting catalytic converters on my old pickup truck that doesn't need them? I'm not opposed to that. I would, and I may eventually one of these days. I've made that argument that you just mentioned, Ed, in a couple editorial columns in my career. But the '93 GMC has 410,000 miles on it. And, all the fluids have been recycled. Anything I change or replace, like the steering gearbox, can be rebuilt. That can go to a rebuilder, and so, and maybe it's a little bit of a soapbox, a self-aggrandizing soapbox. I'm like, I'm the ultimate recycler. I'm the ultimate environmentalist here with this thing.
I just meant, does it cause you any sleep at night? Because for me, it really doesn't either.
No.
But I do understand that the largest contributor to clement change is vehicles.
Cows.
No, that's a big contributor, but it's not the largest. But you know what I mean. And I'm aware of that, and it's like I look at the air quality yesterday, and I was looking at taking my son somewhere, and I'm like, man.
It is vehicles, but I wasn't joking about it's. Personal transportation, privately owned vehicles is a smaller piece than the boat that sent them over to our shore and the airplanes that travel to support all the Amazon Prime purchases. That
sort of. I mean, personal vehicles add up to a lot. Remember, I mean, there's 15 million new ones sold a year just in the
Only
U.S.
Yeah,
80-some million globally every year. So 10 years, that's almost 1 billion.
The problem is this is that large number math thing where our pea-sized brains are too small to comprehend. Like the impact all the way back to the mining of the ore for the body panels and the.
No, I'm just curious.
Yeah, because you could go way.
How deep you want to go?
Yeah, and. Because that's, I know, an argument that's come up with the life cycle of a gasoline car versus an electric car, and starting from the origin, how far back do you really want to go?
Yeah, and those are in my mind fairly unkosher studies because they're like, the lithium mining, and I'm like, you didn't mention the oil mining.
Because I was thinking about that too.
Really bad.
At the beginning of the oil industry in the 1800s or whatever, that had to be looked at as I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about the industry, but you could say we're very good now at extracting oil out of the ground.
Yep.
Well,
In terms of like
could say
where it used to be,
Yeah.
but levying that argument
yeah.
that people are saying about cobalt and lithium mines and
Yeah.
how dirty. But what's to say that can't?
well, yeah, or you just get rid of cobalt and lithium altogether and have a different material for the battery.
Well,
and by the way, I'm just going to tell you this is my favorite thing I've learned. You know, you cannot refine oil into gasoline without cobalt. You need cobalt.
Oh,
yeah,
I see.
yeah, you need it. It's you know, and actually a bit of cobalt. It's not
I like
a little bit.
to avoid that argument completely and just talk about it from an innovation perspective. Like the people who are arguing against EVs and that we should just stop and go back to internal combustion.
Right.
To me, it's a non-starter because if you look at I think it's to your point about just extracting oil out of the ground, but the automotive industry in general, like we went from these crazy cars. Let's just go back to the 80s. Like again, these V8s that were 5 liters, displacing 5 liters and making 120 horsepower.
Yeah, terrible.
To now, we have
a 5 liter does 480 easy.
Yeah.
or the smaller displacement, the crazy turbocharging stuff. We have reached like peak maybe. We've talked about the horsepower wars, the golden age of horsepower. We're living in
Toyota
it.
won it with the GR Corolla.
This GR Corolla,
1.5 liters, 300 horsepower.
Yeah,
That's
so
amazing. Yeah,
if you
that's really cool.
now transpose that on where we could be in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years with electric vehicles, if we just keep iterating and innovating, like this is where we're kind of bringing it full circle. Like it's why I'm slightly bummed that there isn't more interest and excitement from the aftermarket or the hot rodding community about like having an open mind about, hey, like these things are really fast and they're really heavy. So I always think of weight in particular. This is the actual, when electric cars are light, how amazing will that be? That's like that's the event horizon that we need to get to.
And that's Toyota, it sounds like, but that is coming.
Solid-state batteries and this and that. But
once they don't need to be liquid cooled, the weight just goes away.
I don't know.
That would be really. I was thinking about that, driving that F-150, because I don't know. I'd imagine that's about 5,000 pounds.
6,800.
No, it's crazy.
Okay.
heavy.
Batteries are heavy.
Okay.
6,800
It's like 1,000 pounds heavier than normally.
more
apples to apples.
About 1,500 pounds.
Apples to apples to
about 1,500 pounds.
Wow.
heavier.
Similar F-150.
Yeah.
And again, forgive my ignorance, but in my mind, most electric cars are SUVs or something like larger.
Yeah, they're big. Well, the ones people care about. I mean, there are like the Nissan Leaf things, but they have no range.
The first generation were small, like pod-like vehicles that everybody's nightmare, like Bolts and.
But like the Model S, the Model 3, which is really well done electric car, it's just under 4,000 pounds.
But
it has about a
and the
300-mile
breakthrough EV was Tesla Model S in 2013, which was a big body sedan the size of your Caprice.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the Model 3 again. I mean, it is the Model S is like 4,900 pounds. Model 3 is like 3,900 pounds. Tesla did a really admirable job of like getting the weight out of the Model 3. So.
I guess this goes back to your dumb car thing. Is there a market? Would there be a manufacturer who would want to do something without all the I don't. It'd be nice not to have like cameras all over the place and like take some of the tech down and maybe like.
I think so. I 100% I think so, and I actually think the industry that's leading this, it's guys like Jonathan Ward at Icon. It's this Restomod angle where they're putting Tesla powertrains into old cars because you get that. You can kind of have the analog look and feel and sensibility. You can even put. BZ was telling us you can put a manual transmission into an electric vehicle. It's not a problem. It's just not super efficient.
Right.
But yeah, I would love, and I think manufacturers are actually learning this. VW in particular. They have learned that all of their haptic controls, the sliders, the lack of buttons, like there's and this is what's great. The consumers just be loud, be angry about this kind of stuff. Shake your fist, send an email, because the manufacturers are listening. They're starting to put knobs and dials back into cars.
Honda put the volume knob back in after 8 years of everyone saying like, I hate this car because it doesn't have a volume knob.
Yeah.
They finally glued one on.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing for all you young. I don't know. We have like 3 young car designers who listen to this, but get into an old car. Get into a car like John's where you can tune, you can touch the radio. I'm just assuming I've never been in your car.
That's cool.
But you can tune the volume and the radio without looking at it. This is the weirdest thing.
Scroll.
Just
and the temperature and the fan.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. Anytime you have to push on a screen, you have to you're taking your eyes off the road. So the beauty of dials is you don't have to do that. So
I drove this car. It's one of the best cars I've ever driven. The Roof SCR. So it looks like a Porsche, not a Porsche. Carbon fiber. Everything.
Yeah.
Freeman Thomas actually designed the body because it's the same length as a G bodies on 60s, 70s, 80s, 911, but because it's so much wider, they did all these tricks to make it look so it doesn't look fat. It looks cool.
Yeah.
500 horsepower, naturally aspirated, manual, and my favorite part about it was there was no screen. It looked like a 60s 911.
That's cool.
It had Bluetooth. It had just like Jonathan Ward does.
Yeah.
Problem is it's $1 million car.
Sure.
Jonathan
dumb
Ward's
car,
cars,
baby. Dumb car.
Well, but dumb cars might be really expensive to do that because I don't know.
I don't know. That's interesting, but that may be. I'm sorry.
Oh, I like that we all agree that like being able to tune the radio without looking at a screen.
Yeah.
Like it was the best. It was kick on brights. I want kick on brights.
That may be something where the enthusiast aftermarket may be able to create that kind of an industry. That you're talking about.
Yeah.
Or like make a Tesla without a screen.
Yeah, something like that.
I like the 1,000 horsepower. I don't like having to shift gears on a screen.
What would you do? How would you even do that?
You wouldn't do that, but maybe you could do this. I mean, you just have a drive,
a charge indicator, and interesting.
I don't know. A gauge. Yeah.
So the the last question for me, from my end, is it inevitable for John McGann, editor-in-chief of Hot Rod, to cast your mind forward? Are you gonna own an EV? Are you gonna be driving one? You pick one up in 20 years on the used market. There'll be like a cool, somebody cracks the code on a Tesla Plaid, and you can turn it into a 2,000 horsepower.
Right.
And you could, if you wanted, you can shift gears because there's something. Like, is this? Or are you just like, I'm gas forever, like a Freiberger T-shirt?
I'm more leaning towards the gasoline. I think that's just what I like.
Okay. All right.
Fair. Yeah.
I will say I got talked into. What's the electronic show that just happened in Long Beach?
CES.
No.
Oh, Long Beach. Electrify Expo.
Electrify Expo.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's one that's happening later this year in Austin.
Yes. At the end of it's the same. So it opens Electrify Expo. Our buddy BJ Burtwell, that's his baby. Launches in Long Beach in May, and it finishes in November in Austin, Texas.
Okay. My friend Lawson, who used to work at AEM.
Lawson Malika.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He and I were talking yesterday because he was the one who got me driving that Mustang that they built.
Yep.
Right.
He's like, there were a lot of cars there at Long Beach, and you should check them out. He said someone electrified a 57 Chevy.
Yep.
There was an electric drivetrain in a 32 Ford.
Yep. I know exactly who he's talking to. I need to introduce you to him. His name is Mark Davis. He's actually a personal friend. He's a good friend of my brother's. He runs a company called Moment Motors out of Austin, Texas. And he's an old hot rodder. He loves hot rodding. He actually had a 32 Ford. He built it by hand. And that's what he's like. He ran a recruiting. He's a tech guy. He made a bunch of money there. And he's like, you know what? I'm giving that all up because of his love of hot rodding. But he's seen the electric hot rodding future. So he's been doing like a Jonathan Ward, like BZ, like taking older cars and putting the right combination of battery and motor into them. So he's the guy you need to talk to.
And I would say I wanted you to drive my Rivian today because the Lightning's cool, but the Lightning's just you electrified a pickup truck, where the Rivian is like they made an 835 horsepower monster truck.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's really cool. But do we have the is the Lucid out of Detroit back in LA? Our long-term Lucid?
It's in LA. It's being tested right now.
Because we should let
that was
1,050 horsepower luxury sedan.
You'll get some time in the Lucid.
Okay, so this is the one that did the 10. You know what I mean? So like, I'd love to get, because again, like the Lightning is a great electrified, but they took an existing car. It's not
run before you walk. I mean, walk before you run.
No, I just love to see.
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
like something designed around.
Yeah, and like and the Lucid, like they've miniaturized all the components, so like the motors are small, so there's tons of room in a relatively small car. But you get inside and you're like, wow, this is gigantic. And so I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
I'd like that. I'd be interested.
Yeah.
I will say, like, Lawson talked me into going to this thing in Austin, just preliminarily, but we can't, in my opinion, like, I may be against personally, but I can't ignore that. And I think if we want to be covering a range of things and targeting all kinds of demographics, we can't ignore that in what we do at Hot Rod Magazine and hotrod.com. So I know there's a formula there to make it palatable to, enough people. And I'm not opposed to the technology either. I think that's something that critics would say is like hot rodders are old school thinking, but I have an iPhone. I can, I have apps on it. I'm not opposed to Apple CarPlay and that kind of stuff. But I think I'm curious to see it's going to be difficult because I think people associate like a 32 Ford with, sights and sounds that go with it.
Right. Flatheads.
Yeah. I wrote an editorial column about, I forget the company, Everati, I think it was, that I saw a press release that they built a GT40 with a, Ford GT40 replica with an electric drivetrain in it. And I was like, oh God, this is the wrong car to take.
Yeah, that kind of is the wrong car. Yeah. You want a Roush 560 in there.
But if you get the right car, maybe a throwaway car like a 85 Camaro or something. Throwaway, I shouldn't say that, but
they were throwaway until recently. They really
exactly.
were. Yeah.
And
it was the original owners that were trying to throw them away.
Well, and that's where you're stuck with this build quality. And what do you do with this car?
Fiero.
That would be interesting. Now, that would be really
1,000 horsepower Fiero.
That would be
That's
cool.
what you want.
Plastic,
fantastic.
Yeah. Well,
electric plastic.
Maybe that's something that.
Okay. Well, that was great because that was actually my next question, my last question, which was it's not for John McGann personally, but he has hot rodding. EVs have to come to the hot rod industry.
Your boss Ed Lowe says.
No. I'm just. I was asking.
Put an EV
I don't know
on the cover of Hot Rod.
That's not what I said.
What's it gonna be?
Not what I said. I was asking. I shouldn't have said
exactly
it that way.
what he said.
I was asking whether hot EVs have a place in the hot rodding uppercase and lowercase.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. I do want to check it out. I do want to check this thing out that Lawson was telling me about. I've never been to CES in Las Vegas, but.
It's worth a day. It's worth a day. Probably not more for you.
Okay.
It's a huge show.
I've never been. I'm never going to go.
You should go.
I'll go to Vegas. Can I just go to Vegas?
Yes.
I like to play poker.
But I think more and more people will start to enter things like Drag Week in a Tesla or something, a Lucid. Good Lord. I mean, if that thing's running solid 10s all day long.
My truck runs an 11.6, so.
That'd be funny. I mean, just see the gas, the Rivian going down the track.
The only thing I'll say is my problem with, and I'm glad you're not turning a blind eye to this, but the folks that do, you're just missing out that there's a whole horde of the larger automotive enthusiast population that doesn't have any kind of hang up about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Now, at the same token, like I turn a blind eye to a lot of cool hot rods. You know what I mean? Like I miss out on a lot of cool, and every time I drive one, I'm like, oh yeah, these are, and again, like, an NA V8 with a good, it can be manual or automatic, but a good transmission.
Sure.
It's a thing of beauty.
It is so funny though, because I've been to SEMA a lot. I went last year and I was looking around. I forget what the booth I was in, but I'm talking to some more domestic tuner guys, and there's a Restomodded, I think it was like a C2 Corvette. I thought it looked cool, and just the level of. There's levels to it all. Like, oh, that's the wrong wheels.
I know,
that paint, and it's just like
SEMA is the wrong wheel. If there's a car at SEMA, it's on the wrong wheels. It's some disease that this country has where, God, we have.
I started.
You don't see. You go to Europe, all the wheels are good.
I started SEMA. I get it. It's a whole cottage industry, but I'm just like I'm like this weirdo. I'm like, that man's all good. Looks great. I'm just excited, and just that people still throw shade that way. I guess it's an industry, so it helps us. The more picky
Yeah,
people are
that's true.
about stuff, fine.
That gets the passion. That
Yes.
gets to the passion that we were talking about.
I'm a little more
before.
big tent about it. Like, I'm just happy you're here. So
I know.
whatever.
I know.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that you came on the show, John. So I hope you feel like it was worth your time and we didn't roast you too hard.
No, this is great.
Yeah,
Thank you
keep
very
the
much.
keep the passion up, because that is the one thing where, you know, I look at the hot rod community and I love how passionate.
Oh yeah.
It is fantastic, and I love, you know, and it's something that, like, you know, as I get older and my kid sucks more of my brain power out of my body, like I can't be as passionate as I once was, but like I see this and it's great.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thank you very much for inviting me. This was a lot of fun.
That was great.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
John, again, everybody. Yay.